So finally, in incomplete records, this being the fourth part, we will be looking at markup and margin. And these are two very important concepts that will enable you to find some key missing figures in this topic on incomplete records. And the markup is based on a profit percentage that is added on to the cost price of the goods. So, and this enables the business to determine a selling price. So, cost price plus the markup is equal to the selling price. Cost price plus markup is equal to a selling price. So if a business uses a markup of 25%, then an item that they buy, cost price of $100, will be sold for, after adding the markup, will be sold at a selling price of $125. So if the cost price plus the markup is equal to selling price, and I've shown you in a little table here, there with the cost price of $100, the profit markup's been added to it, and the selling price is $125. This can also be shown differently in a format that you are very familiar with, where we have sales of 125 based on the figures on the example I've used, cost of sales of 100, and giving you a gross profit of 25. Now you are very familiar with this format, which is straight out of the income statement, and the key with finding this, in this case, finding the missing sales using the markup, or finding the missing cost of sales using the markup, or using the margin, which I'll cover soon, is that you can then construct your income statement and find other key bits of missing information to pick up the extra marks. Now you know that cost of sales is made up of opening stock plus purchases less closing stock or closing inventory, and by you finding out, or by you indicating what the opening stock or what the purchases is or what the closing stock is, you will gain extra marks for finding that missing information. Now if you're given the margin instead of the markup, the approach is slightly different, although it will still be based on sales, cost of sales, and gross profit. So the margin, you should, when you see the margin, you should think of gross profit margin. So the gross profit margin is a percentage of sales. So using the same figures, or using 25% as my example, and assuming that the gross profit margin was 25%, then GP is 25%. What is it 25% of? It is 25% of sales, which means sales has to be 100. That makes the gross profit 25% of sales. So what is cost of sales then? Look at the relationship between these two figures, and you can figure out what cost of sales is. What do you think it is? It's got to be 75. So here's example 1 taken out of your workbook, and in this case we've been given the margin, and here it is. The margin is 25%, and cost of sales is $300, because they've got to give you some information, and they're prepared to tell you that the cost of sales is $300, but they're not going to tell you what the sales figure is or what the gross profit figure is, but they give you the margin. Now, you know that the margin is a certain percentage of sales. So if sales is 100 and the gross profit margin is 25, it is 25% of sales, which leaves cost of sales as the missing figure, which makes it 75. Now look at the relationship between sales, cost of sales, and gross profit in this column here, in my simplified column. Can we simplify it even further? Yes, we can. And when we simplify it further, you'll find that your basic maths tells you that sales becomes 4, cost of sales becomes 3, and gross profit becomes 1. And that is the relationship between sales, cost of sales, and gross profit. So in this case, if cost of sales is $300, it's equivalent to 3. It won't change, it's $300. But sales is equivalent to 4, which means sales is $400, and of course your gross profit, which is 25% of sales, is $100. Now this is using simple figures. You could find the sales if the margin was 25% using the very theory that I've shown you here. You can find this sales no matter how complicated the cost of sales figure is. And in my second example down here, we have the markup is given to us. So in this example, down here the markup is given to us, and the markup is 40%, and this time sales is given to us, so we don't know what the cost of sales is, and we need the cost of sales because that will enable us to find what the purchases figure is, or what closing stock or opening stock is. Depends on what information is withheld from us. So it's really important to find cost of sales if sales is given, because cost of sales then enables you to make another breakthrough. So if the markup is 40%, as you've been shown previously, the markup is 40% of the cost price. So it's 40% of that there, the cost price, which means that sales, in terms of completing this table, sales has to be equivalent to 140, because sales less cost of sales is gross profit. And if the markup is 40%, you got to assume that the cost of sales is 100, because it's 40% of 100. That means the markup is 40% of cost of sales, which means sales has to be equivalent to 140. So if sales is 7,000, which is what we've been told, and it's equivalent to 140, can we then find out what cost of sales and gross profit is? Yes, we can. We can use a calculator and find it quite easily. Or if you want to simplify this further, you could take that 140 and simplify it further by making it 14 and making the cost of sales 10 and the gross profit 4. Or you could simplify it even further by making it 7, 5, and 2. Now look at the relationship of these three figures. It all started from the markup being 40%. So likewise, you can go and find these two figures very easily, which means that once you do a slight bit of calculation, you'll come up with a cost of sales of 5,000 and gross profit of 2,000. And that's all. We've arrived at that by using a markup of 40%. Now you could use the same theory no matter what the markup is, and you can find the cost of sales no matter how complicated and how blown out the sales figure is, just by using this simple approach. In this task, you've been given the markup, and the markup is 33%. So here it is. The markup is 33%. You're also given opening inventory up there, closing inventory, and you're given sales. So you need to find the cost of sales, which will then enable you to find the gross profit, and then move on to the rest of the income statement. But in this case, all you need to show is the gross profit. So if the markup is 33%, remember, whatever the markup is a percentage that has been added on to cost of sales. So you have to assume then that cost of sales is 100, and the gross profit markup is 33 and a third. That means sales is equivalent to 133 and a third. So that is what the proportions are, the relationships between sales, cost of sales, and gross profit. Because the markup is 33 and a third percent, whatever is bought for 100 has to be sold for more than 100. So it is sold for 133 and a third, which leaves at 33 and a third for gross profit. Now, you could simplify this further and look at the proportions and of these three figures here. Look at the proportions in this column and simplify it further and make that 4, 3, and 1. Is that correct? Yes, it is, because 133 and a third, 100, and 33 and a third will be the same as 4, 3, and 1. Now you can easily find the missing information. So I would suggest you find the missing information according to the way it's numbered. So you'll first find number 1, gross profit, and if sales of 84,000 is equivalent to 4, then the gross profit, which is equivalent to 1 or a quarter of 84,000, will be 21,000. And that means that the number 2 becomes quite easy to find, and number 2 then is 63,000. Or you could go and find what is a 3/4 of 84,000. See, there's 3 over 4, and you'll get 63,000. And then I'd suggest you work backwards and find the missing number 3, and then you will find purchases. So in this case, most of the marks will be given for finding the purchases figure. So then working backwards, this becomes 74,000, and it does become 74,000 because number 2 is 63,000, closing inventory is 11,000, and if we are working backwards, we add closing inventory and we get 74,000, which means that the missing figure there is purchases of 65,000. So that now brings us to the end of this topic on incomplete records. So a quick summary of markup and margin then. Markup is the profit that is added on to cost of sales. So a easy formula to remember that is gross profit over cost of sales is your markup, and margin is the percentage of gross profit over sales. And when simplifying these figures so that you can find the missing information easily, remember that for markup, you've got to make cost of sales equivalent to 100, and for margin, you've got to make sales equivalent to 100.